Hello Internet, welcome back to Tromsø Twilight, the channel where I, Vincent, normally talk to you, the abyss, about books, movies, music that I find interesting, that I enjoy, or a combination of the two. I say normally because I will be talking more about political ideas and the current state of the world in this video. When I made this channel at the beginning of this year, I made it to try and get myself out of a slump where I wanted to engage more with the things that I'm interested in and the things that excite me, and force myself to think about them enough that I could verbalize my experience of books and films and music, um, and share it with the world as a kind of act of generosity. And I haven't been particularly interested in making this channel a place where I talk about my political views. But this week is so intense politically that I felt like I would get on here and say a couple of things that I think are not talked about enough. So, okay, the context for this video is that it's now Sunday, the 14th of September 2025, and in the past 5 days, Charlie Kirk, the far-right influencer, was shot and died, and there was an enormous far-right rally in the United Kingdom, in London, where the English Defence League bussed people in from all over the country, and an estimated 150,000 people demonstrated in what has to be the largest, by far, fascist rally in the United Kingdom since the Black Shirts. All this is horrifying enough, but then some other things really started to stress me out. One of them is that Elon Musk participated by video link in this rally, which was fronted by the far right figure in the UK, Tommy Robinson. They had a conversation by video, and Elon Musk had a t-shirt on that said either "What would Orwell do" or "What would Orwell think," one of the two. I think it was "What would Orwell do." And this is completely insane because George Orwell was a Trotskyite communist for a lot of his life. He was a hardline socialist, and he signed up for the International Brigade to actually physically kill fascists. So the people demonstrating in this rally belong to an ideology that George Orwell literally took up armed rebellion against. At the same time, the rally is called, what's it called now? It's called like Unite the Kingdom, when it's clearly divisive, and it's called a free speech rally, whilst the ideology driving it is anti-Muslim, it's anti-queer, it's anti-immigration. It defines itself mostly by what it is against. So how this can be a rally for free speech is really quite confusing. So we're living basically in a world where everything is its opposite, where Elon Musk can be tweeting on his Twitter account, let's not call it by the name he gave it, and he's writing somebody, or he's retweeting things like, somebody find a single example of Charlie Kirk being anti-woman or racist, and you just can't do it. Nobody can find it. This is insane. Like, everything Charlie Kirk said, if you know anything about neo-Nazi theory or neo-Nazi ideas, it's all an expression of extreme hardline right-wing ideology. We're at a weird point in history where fascists can stand on the stage and actually give a fascist salute and then say, give me a single example of me doing something racist. Something that you need to understand about the Unite the Kingdom rally with the English Defence League in the UK, if you don't live in England or the UK, is the significance of the George Cross flag that most of these people are wearing or carrying, which is a white flag with a red cross on it. Now, I live in Scandinavia, where the national flag does not have the same connotations that it has in the UK. If you live in America and have the stars and stripes everywhere, you will not understand how frightening it is for immigrants and non white people in the UK to see this flag everywhere. It's now hanging all around the country. People are wearing it all the time. When I was a kid growing up in the UK, there were only ever two contexts, maybe three, where you saw the George Cross. One was, well, the most benign is on the day that celebrates the Saint George, where people would bring out it's like a national day of celebration where some people would use this flag. But even that has always been, if you saw people doing that, you would have an idea that they at least were more to the right politically. The only other two contexts you ever saw this flag was football, with the English World Cup, or fascists, racists. And the reason why most people don't use the George Cross flag is twofold. One of them is that uh, it's more normal in the United Kingdom and kind of less divisive to use the Union Jack, which is the symbol of all the countries in the United Kingdom. I mean, the Welsh dragon, you can't really see it on there, but it's a kind of combined flag. So it's closer to the Stars and Stripes in America, which is supposed to be the flag of the Union. The other reason is that it has such intense connotations to the National Front, which were a neo-Nazi organization, to skinhead violence, to racism. And it's if you have it hanging outside your house, it's always been a clear indication that you're extremely patriotic, at the very least, probably a racist. So again, everything is its opposite. You have the Unite the Kingdom rally, but most of the people are wearing a flag which is very specifically English, not British. To get to the main point of this video, I think that if you want to understand what's happening from the Unite the Right rally in America some years back to this Unite the Kingdom rally now, and if you want to understand the kind of propaganda that Elon Musk is boosting on the internet in advance of every election, so in the example of the recent French election, he was boosting anti-Muslim propaganda about France. He's been amplifying stories that are divisive about the United Kingdom for the past couple of years. There's a lot of focus on crime, immigration, racial difference. And the question it might be why? And the reason is something called Palingenetic Ultranationalism, or the fascist concept of Palingenesis. The concept of Palingenesis in the context of political theory or political mythology is the defining moment of creation in a nation. So an example of this is the famous Ku Klux Klan propaganda film Birth of a Nation in America. It's supposed to show the moment that the nation, and often usually the ethnic state, was created. Political theorist Roger Griffin coined this term or described this idea in the 1990s, in the early 90s. And in this theory, fascist ideology is driven by an idea that a country or a state needs to reach a point of complete collapse, at which point a strong figure will emerge to lead a popular revolution, which will become the defining moment of the creation of an ethno-state. This means that fascists are driven to push society to a point of collapse in order to create the conditions for the rising of their ideal society, their ideal ethnic state, their ultranationalist Palingenesis. So what you see is the continual criticism of, erosion of, and deliberate destruction of all of society's kind of basic conditions, from the health service to the political system to basic community cohesion. You start to see every different political and religious group being pitted against each other, being criticized. You'll find continual scapegoating from trans people to the queer community to Asians, Muslims, and so forth. in order to create conditions of total social collapse, in order that a figure can come forward and unite their kind of like white fascist community. You might be saying, well, how can Elon Musk, how can Donald Trump, how can Nigel Farage be considered to be fascists or Nazis when they are sympathetic to Israel? And there are several answers to this that are quite simple. One of them is that since 9/11, far right propaganda has focused more on Islam than it has on Judaism. And the reason for this is that it was easier to make Muslims an outgroup in America after a Muslim terrorist organization had killed Americans on American soil. That's reason number one. Reason number two is that in that context, Israel is seen as the kind of European or American bastion against Islam in the Middle East. But the third reason is that Israel is an ethno-state. It's a country where a particular religious and ethnic demographic are automatically eligible for citizenship, and where the entire culture is based around the religious and ethnic makeup of its citizenry. Since the end of white South Africa, no such example for ostensibly white people exists, and it's precisely the situation that the far right in England and America aspire to for their own nations. You might add another reason, which is that if you want to persecute Jews in America and Europe, it's easier to do it if you can argue that they have a homeland elsewhere, that it's easier to other them if you can theoretically send them to the Middle East. All right, before I get to the final argument of this video, I want to talk about another cultural example of palingenesis and the mythology of it and how you can see this theory in action, and that is Frank Miller's book The Dark Knight, which became the defining Batman mythology from around the time that actually before Christopher Nolan made his famous film using the same name. In the original Batman comic, The Dark Knight, society is in a state of total collapse. There are no real social ties anymore. People are subject to crime. They are scared. There's poverty. And there's loads of youths going around beating people up. And Batman, as a kind of strong, male, violent, vigilante figure, comes forward as a kind of hero working outside of mainstream culture and society, and actually more or less overthrows the governmental apparatus of Gotham City and takes these like thugs and criminals and makes them into his youth organization, in the same way that the Nazis did with the Hitlerjugend, and in the same way that Tommy Robinson does with football hooligans and other types of violent people in the United Kingdom. It takes them in under the umbrella of the English Defence League. And when I read Dark Knight, I thought it was a satire on the superhero genre because, as has been pointed out, this masked vigilante with a cape figure is actually very close to the Ku Klux Klan. So I thought that he was kind of pointing out the right-wing tendencies of superhero mythology by pushing it to its absolute extreme. But later, it became evident that Frank Miller actually has very far-right political tendencies. He was a violent critic of the Occupy movement. he's extremely anti-Islamic, and he believes that there's a culture war coming between the West and the East. So his Dark Knight book, which is now sneaked into the cinema as part of our mainstream culture, is basically a fascist fairy tale. And that brings me to people like Tommy Robinson, because Tommy Robinson doesn't read political theory, and he doesn't, I don't think, really understand concepts like ultranationalist palingenesis or palingenetic ethno-nationalism. But Steve Bannon does. And Steve Bannon is one of the people who lifts an organization like the EDL out of what it has been, which is basically a drinking club for undereducated, right-wing, alienated white men in the UK, into something like this enormous rally. And Steve Bannon, who is politically active without ever having been elected in America, in the United Kingdom, in the same way as Elon Musk, who is a figure who has grown out of ethno-nationalism in South Africa, they are in a position to manipulate media, manipulate organizations like the EDL, and what Tommy Robinson or people like him, and also actually Musk, have as a fantasy is that they will be this Batman figure that after the total collapse, the accelerated collapse of our society, will lead us into the glowing fascist future. And when I say us, it won't be me, and it won't be most of the people watching this, but maybe it will be a few of you pure Aryan types. Maybe you'll be inheriting the ashes of the society that it took hundreds of years to build. I wanted to make this video because I think it's important to say what it is. These people are doing all of this and at the same time arguing that it's a paranoid fantasy when we identify what it actually is. But the theory is documented, it's been described, everybody actually knows what it is. It's right-wing ultra-accelerationism to try to bring about social collapse in order to bring us into the Nazi utopia of these people's imagined future. I think that's it for me for now. I'll be back soon. I don't know what I'm going to be talking about next. Maybe the book I just read, Erasure by Percival Everett. That was pretty amazing. Maybe a couple of movies. Let me know if you've got any requests. Thanks for watching. If you're one of the people who has not watched me before, like let's say I have 20 regular viewers and you're one of the other 5 that stumbled upon this video, I hope you enjoyed it. Don't be fooled into thinking that this is what my videos are normally like. But subscribe if you're interested in hearing about weird books and current horror films. Okay, thanks. Take care for now. Bye bye.